Did you ever wonder what lurks just beyond the edge of your flashlight's beam? What watches from the dark when you think you're alone? Some say it's nothing, but I've seen it, felt it, and tonight, it's coming for you too. Welcome to No Sleep Nightmares Reddit. I'm your name, and in this collection, I'm pulling you into 6 twisted tales from the abyss. Stories of haunted woods, cursed graves, and rivers that hide more than fish. From 2 boys chasing red eyes in the dark to a canoe trip that saved a dog but damned a soul, these nightmares will claw at your mind. Stick around, because the 4th story? It's about something you've probably walked past 100 times and never noticed it watching you back. Curious? You should be. Before we dive in, do me a solid, smash that like button, share this with your bravest friends, and hit subscribe to No Sleep Nightmares Reddit. Help me reach 1,000 subs so I can keep dragging these horrors out of the shadows for you. Ready? Let's lose some sleep together. It was June the 1st, 2012. I was 13, skinny as a twig, with a mop of brown hair that always flopped into my eyes. My cousin Jake, he was 14, a little taller, a little braver, and a whole lot dumber, was my partner in crime. We were on our annual family trip to the summer house, a rickety old cabin perched on the edge of Clover Forest. The place smelled like pine needles and damp earth, with a faint tang of mildew that clung to everything. It was our sanctuary, a week of fishing, swimming, and pretending we were kings of the wild. But that year, something changed. Something woke up in those woods, and it wasn't happy to see us. The first sign came a week into the trip. We were sprawled out on the porch, slurping lemonade that was more sugar than lemon, when this sound, like a rusty gate creaking mixed with a low, guttural growl, rolled out of the trees. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't a bear. It was wrong. Like the forest itself was clearing its throat, warning us to stay out. Mum and Dad brushed it off as nature being nature, but Jake and I, we locked eyes, and I knew we were thinking the same thing. Adventure. The neighbours didn't help. Old Mrs. Hargrove, who lived a half-mile down the dirt road, shuffled over one morning with her cane tapping the ground like a metronome. She smelled like mothballs and regret, and her voice was a dry rasp. "You hear it too, huh?" she said, peering at us over her cracked glasses. "Something's restless out there. Pets been going missing. Cats, dogs, even that yappy little terrier from the miller's place. Ain't no fox taking 'em neither." She leaned in close, her breath sour with coffee and decay. "You boys keep out of them woods. They ain't yours to poke around in." Naturally, that was the dumbest thing she could have said to 2 teenage boys with more curiosity than sense. Jake grinned at me, all teeth and mischief. "Missing pets? Strange noises? Sounds like a job for the Clover detectives." I rolled my eyes but couldn't hide the smirk tugging at my lips. We were hooked. That night, after the adults were snoring and the crickets had taken over the soundtrack, we grabbed our gear, a cheap camcorder from the thrift store, a flashlight that flickered like it was auditioning for a horror movie, and a pocket knife Jake swore could cut through anything but barely sliced butter. The air was thick with humidity, sticking to my skin like a damp rag, and the moon was just a sliver, barely enough to see the path. Clover Forest loomed ahead, its trees clawing at the sky like skeletal hands. The smell hit me first, earth and rot, with a faint, metallic edge I couldn't place. It was the kind of smell that made your nose wrinkle and your gut twist, whispering, "Turn back." We didn't. The forest swallowed us whole. Every step crunched on pine cones and twigs loud enough to wake the dead, or whatever else was out there. Jake held the camcorder, narrating like he was starring in his own ghost hunting show. June 1st, 2012, Clover Forest. 2 brave explorers, me, Jake, and my trusty sidekick, Ethan, venture into the unknown. Objective: find whatever's making that freaky noise, and maybe snag a missing cat while we're at it. I snorted. Sidekick? You're the one who screamed when a frog jumped on you last summer. He shoved me, laughing. "Shut up, man. This is serious." It didn't feel serious, not yet. We wandered deeper, the flashlight beam bouncing off gnarled trunks and spiderwebs that glistened like silver thread. The air grew colder, heavier, pressing against my chest like an invisible hand. Then we saw it. A doll. Not a cute one either. This thing was a nightmare. Matted hair, one eye missing, its porcelain face cracked like it had been dropped from a height. It sat propped against a tree, legs splayed out, staring at us with its single, unblinking eye. "What the hell?" Jake whispered, zooming in with the camcorder. I stepped closer, my sneakers sinking into the mossy ground. The doll smelled like wet dirt and something sour, like spoiled milk. "Probably some homeless guy's treasure," I said, trying to sound casual, but my voice cracked. Jake laughed, a little too loud. "Yeah, his creepy little girlfriend. Let's leave it alone before he comes looking for her." We kept going, joking to drown out the unease slithering up our spines. The forest was too quiet now. No crickets, no owls, just our breathing and the occasional snap of a twig. Then we heard it. Water. A faint trickle, like a creek bubbling somewhere ahead. "Maybe that's where the noise came from," Jake said, picking up the pace. I followed, the flashlight beam wobbling in my shaky grip. The creek was small, barely a foot wide, its water black and still under the dim light. But beyond it, holy hell, 2 red dots glowed in the darkness, steady and unblinking, like embers floating in mid-air. My stomach dropped. "Jake!" I hissed, grabbing his arm. "You see that?" He froze, the camcorder dipping slightly. "Yeah. What the fuck is that?" Before we could guess, the dots moved, fast. A shadow darted between the trees, too tall, too thin, too wrong to be human. The air filled with a sound, a wet, rasping wheeze like something choking on its own lungs. My legs turned to jelly, but Jake yanked me forward. "Run, Ethan, run!" We bolted, branches clawing at our faces, roots tripping us up like the forest itself wanted us dead. The camcorder swung wildly in Jake's hand, catching glimpses of the thing behind us. Long limbs, a hunched back, those damn red eyes burning through the dark. My lungs screamed, my heart hammering so hard I thought it'd burst. The smell hit me again, stronger now. Rotting meat and rust, so thick I could taste it on my tongue. "Keep going!" Jake yelled, his voice high and panicked. I risked a glance back. The thing was closer, its movements jerky, like a puppet with half its strings cut. It didn't run. It lurched, each step cracking the ground like brittle bones. Those eyes locked onto me, and I swear they weren't just glowing, they were hungry. We stumbled into a clearing, the creek gurgling somewhere nearby. I collapsed against a tree, gasping, my flashlight clattering to the ground. Jake spun the camcorder around, scanning the shadows. "Did we lose it? Ethan, did we?" His words cut off as the wheezing came again, closer, from the left. The red eyes flared, 10 feet away, peering from behind a twisted oak. My mouth went dry. "Jake, it's still here." He grabbed my arm, hauling me up. "Back to the house, now." We ran again, the forest a blur of black and green, the thing's rasping breath dogging our heels. I don't know how we made it, but suddenly the cabin's porch light flickered into view, a beacon in the nightmare. We burst through the door, slamming it shut, locking it, piling chairs against it, like that'd stop whatever was out there. Mum found us an hour later, curled up on the couch, shaking, the camcorder still clutched in Jake's hands. "What in God's name happened to you two?" she demanded, her voice sharp with worry. We couldn't answer. How do you explain something you don't even understand? You'd think that'd be the end of it. 2 dumb kids scared straight, never setting foot in Clover Forest again. But here's the kicker. We went back. Yeah, I know. Stupid doesn't even cover it. Call it curiosity, call it pride, call it the kind of bone-deep idiocy only teenagers have. The next night, after arguing ourselves hoarse, we grabbed better flashlights, my dad's old hunting knife, and a baseball bat from the garage. We had to know what it was. We had to see it. The forest was different this time. The air was colder, sharper, like it had been waiting for us. The smell was worse, decay so pungent it stung my eyes. We retraced our steps, quieter now, no joking, no bravado. Just two kids pretending they weren't terrified out of their minds. Jake held the camcorder steady, whispering into the mic. Day 2. We're back. Whatever's out here, we're getting it on tape. We reached the creek again. The doll was gone. Nothing but a patch of flattened moss where it had been. My skin prickled. Someone took it, I muttered. Jake shook his head. Or something. We crossed the creek, the water icy against our sneakers, and that's when we saw them again. Those red eyes glowing across the clearing, further away this time, but no less menacing. I gripped the bat, my knuckles white. What do we do? Jake swallowed hard, his voice barely a whisper. We get closer. We need a better shot. I wanted to slap him. Are you insane? That thing chased us. But he was already moving, slow and deliberate, the camcorder trained on the eyes. Against every screaming instinct, I followed. The thing didn't bolt this time. It stood there, half hidden by the trees, watching us. The flashlight caught glimpses. Pale, mottled skin stretched tight over jagged bones, arms too long, fingers curling like claws. Its head tilted, and that wheezing sound rattled out again, louder, wetter, like it was laughing at us. Jake zoomed in. Holy shit. Ethan, it's not a bear. It's not anything. Then it moved. Not toward us. Away. It loped off into the dark, those red eyes winking out like dying stars. We stood there, frozen, the silence roaring in our ears. Did it run from us? I asked, my voice trembling. Jake lowered the camcorder, his face pale. Maybe it's scared too. We didn't chase it, not that night, but the footage, God, the footage, showed something we didn't see in the moment. Later, back at the cabin, we played it back on the tiny screen, huddled under a blanket like kids watching a scary movie. There, in the background, while we were arguing by the creek, those red eyes were watching us from a different angle. Closer. Too close. It had circled us, silent as death, and we hadn't even noticed. Jake uploaded the video to YouTube, calling it Clover Forest Creature. We thought maybe someone out there would know what it was. Mothman, a Wendigo, some backwoods mutant. A few comments trickled in. Fake. Cool effects. You guys are idiots. One guy wrote, looks like the thing I saw in '98. Stay out of those woods. No one took it seriously, and we didn't post again. The channel's still there, a digital tombstone for our nightmare. But here's the thing, I've never gone back to Clover Forest. Jake has. He's braver than me, or maybe just more reckless. He says it's quiet now, normal, like nothing ever happened. Me? I can't shake it. I smell that rot in my dreams, hear that wheezing when the wind blows too hard. I see those eyes in every shadow, every dark corner. And sometimes, late at night, I wonder if it's still out there, waiting. Not for Jake, for me. Well, there you have it. 2 boys, a camcorder, and a pair of red eyes that still burn in my nightmares. Clover Forest didn't just scare Ethan and Jake. It marked them, left them wondering if that thing ever really let them go. But if you think the woods are bad, wait until you step into a place where the dead don't sleep. Up next, we're following Frank into St. Agnes Cemetery, a graveyard where the shadows whisper, giggle, and grab. What's waiting there? You'll wish you didn't ask. Before we dig in, hit that subscribe button for No Sleep Nightmares Reddit and drop a comment. Tell me, what would you do if those eyes followed you home? Let's keep the terror rolling. It was September the 1st, 2024. I'd been running my YouTube channel, Franco TV, for years, chasing ghosts, poking at the unknown, and laughing in the face of fear. I was 32, wiry, with a mop of black hair and a grin that said, "I've got this," even when I didn't. My viewers loved it. The bravado, the bravura, the way I'd waltz into haunted hotspots like I owned the place. But that night, in the old St. Agnes Cemetery, I wasn't the hunter. I was the prey. St. Agnes wasn't just any graveyard. Tucked on the edge of town, it was a sprawling mess of cracked tombstones and overgrown weeds, the kind of place where the air tasted like rust and regret. Locals whispered about it, said the dead didn't stay buried, that shadowy figures danced between the graves, that rituals happened under the cover of night. Demonic, satanic, call it what you will. The rumors were thick as the fog that rolled in after dusk. I'd been there once before, a year prior, and stumbled onto something. A circle of robed figures chanting nonsense, candles flickering like dying stars. I'd bolted then, but this time I was staying the night. The air hit me first as I stepped through the gate, cold and damp, with a sour tang of decay that clung to my throat. The streetlights barely reached past the entrance, their orange glow swallowed by the dark. My boots crunched on gravel and dead leaves, each step echoing like a gunshot in the stillness. I hefted my gear, a camera with night vision, a candle I'd nabbed from my apartment, ironic, right? And a flashlight that hummed like it was on its last legs. "All right, folks," I said into the lens, forcing a smirk. "Back at St. Agnes. Last time, I caught some weirdos playing dress-up. Tonight, we're going all in. Let's see if the dead want to chat." The cemetery stretched out like a battlefield after the war, tombstones leaning like broken teeth, some so old the names were just smudges. The smell was stronger here. Wet earth, rotting flowers, and something metallic, like blood dried on old iron. I swung the camera around, the night vision filter painting everything in sickly green. "See that?" I said, zooming in on a cluster of candles near a cracked mausoleum. "Fresh wax. Someone's been here. Maybe they're still around." I wasn't alone. That hit me fast. Not because I saw anyone, just a feeling, like eyes boring into my back. I circled the perimeter first, keeping low, the flashlight beams slicing through the fog. The candles bothered me, 5 of them, arranged in a sloppy pentagram, their flames long snuffed out, but the wax still soft. "Recently lit," I muttered, my breath puffing out in white clouds. Great. Either I'm crashing a party, or I'm the guest of honor. Then I heard it. A yell, sharp, guttural, from the east side near the children's plots. My heart kicked up a notch. "All right, got some action already," I said, swinging the camera toward the sound. "Someone's pissed. Let's check it out." I moved fast, the gravel crunching louder now, my pulse thudding in my ears. The fog thickened, curling around my legs like ghostly hands. I reached the edge of the kids' section, tiny headstones, some with faded teddy bears or plastic flowers, and froze. A light flickered, just for a second, then vanished. "You catch that?" I whispered, zooming out. Thought I saw something. Maybe I'm not as alone as I hoped. I stuck the camera out, peering around a tall angel statue, its wings chipped and mossy. The night vision caught a shadow, a figure, tall and thin, slipping into a tomb. My stomach twisted. "Okay, that's not a raccoon," I said, voice low. "Someone's in there. Watching me, maybe. Let's not say hi just yet." I pulled back, my boots sinking into the soggy ground, the smell of mildew and rot so thick I gagged. Dark humor kicked in. If they're throwing a séance, they forgot to send me the invite. Rude. I shifted to the west side of St. Agnes, desperate for a breather after that shadow in the tomb had rattled me. The air here was colder, sharper, slicing into my lungs like a rusty blade. The tombstones were older, some so weathered they looked like they'd melted into the earth. Others toppled over like drunks sprawled out after a bender. The fog hung thicker, a grey shroud that muffled sound and smeared the edges of everything. My boots sank into the soggy ground, each step sucking at my soles with a wet, reluctant schlup. The smell was shifting too. Less damp earth, more decay, a rancid whiff of something long dead, like a forgotten carcass festering under the soil. It coated my tongue, bitter and cloying, and I spat into the dark just to feel human again. I set the camera down on a crooked headstone, its inscription lost to time, and rubbed my hands together, trying to chase the chill from my fingers. "Getting some seriously creepy vibes, folks," I said, forcing that trademark Franco TV grin. "Perfect for the channel. Let's see if we can..." I stopped dead. A sound cut through the silence, faint, high-pitched, like a kid giggling. It drifted from the shadows ahead, bouncing off the stones in a way that made my skin prickle. I snatched the camera, my heart kicking up a notch. "You hear that? Tell me you hear that." I held my breath, straining my ears, the flashlight trembling in my other hand. There it was again, soft, playful, but so wrong. Too hollow, too distant, like it was echoing up from a well or a grave. It wasn't the wind whistling through the crypts. It wasn't some stray cat yowling in the night. It was a child's laugh, clear as day, but laced with something unnatural, something that made my guts twist into knots. "That's a kid laughing," I said, my voice cracking despite my best effort to play it cool. "In a cemetery, at midnight. Awesome." I panned the lens around, the night vision filter painting the scene in sickly green, rows of graves, skeletal trees, the fog swirling like smoke from some unseen fire. "Come on, little ghost, say cheese for the fans." Nothing moved. Just that giggle again, fainter now, teasing me from the edge of hearing. I took a step forward, the gravel crunching too loud, like it was shouting my position to whatever was out there. The air felt charged, electric, like the moment before a storm breaks. "All right," I muttered, half to the camera, half to myself. "Either I'm losing it, or St. Agnes has a new resident who thinks I'm hilarious." Dark humor was my shield, but it was flimsy against that sound. I swung the flashlight in a slow arc, the beam slicing through the fog, catching glints of dew on spiderwebs strung between the stones like tripwires. Then it came again, louder, closer, a cascade of giggles that rolled over me like a wave. My stomach dropped. It wasn't just one voice now. It was two, maybe three, overlapping in a chorus of childish delight. I spun around, the camera jerking with me, my breath fogging the lens. "Okay, what the hell?" I whispered, my bravado slipping. "That's not funny anymore!" The sound seemed to circle me, darting from the left, then the right, then behind. Impossible, unless the kids were playing tag in the dark. My flashlight caught something, a flicker of movement near a low crypt, its iron door rusted shut, vines clawing at the stone like skeletal fingers. I zoomed in, heart hammering. "There! Did you see that?" The night vision showed nothing but shadows, but I swore I'd seen a shape, small, quick, ducking out of sight. The giggles stopped, replaced by a silence so thick it pressed against my eardrums. I stood there, frozen, the rain starting to spit down in cold, stinging drops. The smell hit harder, rotting flowers, wet stone, and that metallic tang again, like blood seeping up from the ground. "Probably just my imagination," I said, forcing a laugh that sounded more like a choke. Or maybe the ghosts here have a comedy club. Sign me up. I'm dying out here. But I wasn't laughing inside. That chorus of giggles had burrowed into my skull, a splinter I couldn't dig out. I edged toward the crypt, each step heavier, the fog curling around my ankles like it wanted to trip me up. The door was pitted with rust, the handle long gone, but there was a gap, black and yawning, just wide enough for something small to slip through. I aimed the camera inside, the green glow illuminating dust and cobwebs, and wait. Something glinted. A tiny shoe, scuffed and muddy, half buried in the dirt. My mouth went dry. No way, I breathed. That's not supposed to be here. The giggles erupted again, right behind me. I whipped around, the flashlight beam slashing wildly, but there was nothing, just fog and graves and that damn silence swallowing everything. My chest tightened, my pulse a frantic drumbeat. Okay, screw this, I said, backing away. If you're out there, kid, keep your laughs to yourself. I'm not in the mood. But deep down, I knew it wasn't a kid, not a living one. That sound wasn't joy. It was a lure, a trap, and I'd almost stepped into it. I turned and booked it toward the main path, the camera shaking in my grip, the rain now a steady hiss against the stones. That giggle stuck with me, echoing in my head long after it faded, a promise that St. Agnes wasn't done with me yet. I was halfway through the cemetery when it happened. I'd just rounded a corner, the flashlight beam bouncing off a wall of tombstones, when I saw her. She was slumped against the stone, all black. Black dress, black hair, black everything, like a shadow that forgot how to fade. My breath caught. Holy shit! I yelped, the camera jerking in my hands. There's someone just leaning there, scared the hell out of me. She didn't move, not a twitch. I stepped closer, the gravel crunching too loud, my flashlight painting her in stark white. Her face was pale, almost grey, eyes closed, lips parted like she'd exhaled her last breath years ago. Hey, you okay? I called, voice shaky. Nothing. I zoomed in, whispering to the lens. She's not moving. Is she alive? Dead? I'm not poking her to find out. I backed off, my chest tight. Okay, nope, not dealing with that, I said, forcing a grin. If she's napping, she picked the worst spot. If she's dead, well, she's got plenty of company. I turned to head for the main entrance, the rain picking up now, fat, cold drops splattering my jacket. The smell of wet stone mixed with that rotting stench, and I gagged again. Perfect. Now it's a horror movie cliché. Then the banging started, loud, rhythmic, like someone pounding on a crypt door. It came from ahead, near the gate. What the hell? I muttered, swinging the camera around. The rain intensified, drumming on the ground, drowning out everything but that thump, thump, thump. My flashlight caught something, a figure darting out of the shadows, straight at me. She was on me before I could blink. Same black dress, same pale face, but her eyes were open now, wild, bloodshot, glaring right through me. "Run!" she screamed, her voice raw and jagged. Get out! Get out now!" I stumbled back, the camera nearly slipping from my hands. "Whoa, lady, what the—" She grabbed my arm, her fingers ice cold, nails digging in. "He's not here! I can't find him! Help me!" I yanked free, heart slamming against my ribs. "Find who? What's going on?" She didn't answer, just stared, her mouth twisting into a grimace. "He's dead," she hissed, "and I'm still looking. You shouldn't be here." Then she bolted, vanishing into the rain-soaked dark. I stood there, soaked, shaking, the camera trembling in my grip. "Okay, what the fuck just happened?" I said, voice high. "She's looking for her husband, who's dead, and she wants my help. Nope, I'm out." The banging stopped, but the air felt heavier, like the cemetery itself was holding its breath. I didn't wait to find out why. I ran, the gate looming ahead, my boots slipping on wet stone. I made it out, barely. The rain chased me all the way home, and I spent the night hunched over my footage, replaying it, trying to make sense of it. The woman's face, those eyes, haunted me. The giggle, the shadow in the tomb, the banging, it was too much. I uploaded the video, called it Saint
Agnes Night Terror, and swore I'd never go back. Viewers ate it up, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd left something behind, or brought something with me. Weeks later, I found it. A scratch on my arm, right where she'd grabbed me. 5 thin lines, red and raw like claw marks. They wouldn't heal, and sometimes, late at night, I hear it. A faint giggle echoing from the dark.
Frank thought he could outrun St. Agnes, but those giggles, that woman in black, and those claw marks on his arm say otherwise. A cemetery's supposed to be quiet, right? Not this one. It's alive, and it doesn't forget. Ready for a breather? Don't get comfy. Next up, we're paddling with Tom on a river that's anything but peaceful. A dog in the mud sounds sweet, until you realize what pulled it there. This one's a rescue with teeth, folks. If Frank's nightmare got under your skin, smash that subscribe for No Sleep Nightmares Reddit and leave a comment. What's creepier, the giggles or the grab? Stick with me, the river's calling. It was August 1st, 2024. I was deep into my solo canoe trek across Canada, a madcap odyssey from the Rockies to Montreal. I'm 43, grizzled from years at sea, with a beard that's more grey than brown, and a knack for finding trouble where others see beauty. My YouTube channel, What in the World, was my lifeline, sharing the wild highs and brutal lows of a life untethered. That morning, the river was a mirror of gold, the Rockies looming like silent giants in the distance. The air smelled crisp, pine, water, and a faint musk of earth warming under the sun. My canoe cut through the stillness, a sleek wooden relic I'd named Drifter, its paddle dipping with a rhythm that felt like my heartbeat. I was alone, or so I thought. The wilderness has a way of lulling you, birds chirping, water lapping, the occasional splash of a fish. It's peaceful until it isn't. I'd camped the night before on a sandy spit, the fire crackling under a sky so clear it hurt to look at. No nightmares then, just the quiet hum of nature. But that day, something shifted. The river felt heavier, like it was holding its breath. The smell changed too, a sour undertone creeping in, like wet fur left to rot. I brushed it off. Just the wild doing its thing, I muttered, adjusting the camera clipped to Drifter's bow. Day 47, folks. Smooth sailing so far. Let's see what the river's got for us. Then I heard it, a sound that didn't belong. A weak, rasping bark, more whimper than howl, cutting through the morning calm. My head snapped up, paddle pausing mid-stroke. "What the hell?" I said, squinting at the shore. The reeds swayed, but there was no wind. The bark came again, fainter, from a tangle of mud and logs about 50 yards ahead. I grabbed the camera, zooming in. Sounds like a dog. Doesn't sound good either. Let's check it out. I steered Drifter toward the bank, the canoe's bow scraping against jagged rocks with a gritty, teeth-grinding groan that echoed across the still water. The smell hit me like a fist. Mud so thick and sour it clung to the back of my throat, mingled with a rancid decay that curled my nostrils, and that sharp animal reek, wet and festering like a hide left to rot in the rain. I squinted through the reeds, their tips swaying despite the dead calm, as if something unseen brushed against them. The barking had stopped, replaced by a pitiful, wheezing whine that clawed at my ears and tugged at something primal in my chest. Pity, sure, but also a flicker of dread I couldn't shake. "Hang on, buddy," I called, my voice rough from days of solitude. Captain Tom's on the case. I hopped out, boots sinking into the muck with a wet, greedy slurp that sucked the warmth from my toes. The cold slime oozed up past my ankles, seeping through my socks, a clammy grip that felt alive, possessive, like the riverbank didn't want me walking away. I cursed under my breath, yanking my legs free with each step, the effort sending a dull ache up my calves. The ground was a treacherous mess, twisted roots jutting out like skeletal fingers, sodden logs slick with moss, and a carpet of reeds that hissed and crunched underfoot, releasing bursts of that sour stench with every move. The air was heavy, humid, pressing against my lungs like a damp rag, and the faint buzz of flies, too many for a morning this cool, prickled at my nerves. Perfect, I muttered, wiping sweat from my brow despite the chill. A 5-star swamp resort, just needs a gator to complete the vibe. The camera, clipped to my chest now, caught every slogging step, the lens bouncing with my uneven gait. That whine came again, weaker, more desperate, pulling me toward a tangle of fallen timber and mud so dark it looked like tar. I pushed through the reeds, their sharp edges snagging my jacket, and froze. There it was, a flash of white fur, matted and streaked with filth, barely visible in the snarl of roots and debris. A dog, small and frail, its back legs pinned under a waterlogged log that must have weighed 50 pounds. Its coat was a mess, plastered with mud that reeked of rot and something worse, something alive yet dying, a stench that made my stomach lurch. Its eyes were wide, glassy, staring up at me through the haze, pleading. But there was something off about them, too still, too knowing, like they'd seen more than a trapped mutt should. Poor bastard, I said, kneeling beside it, the mud squelching under my knees, cold and thick as it soaked through my jeans. How long you been stuck in this shit? The log was a beast, rotten, splintered, its bark peeling away in slimy strips that stuck to my gloves. I grunted, heaving it up, muscles straining as the wood groaned and cracked, releasing a puff of rancid air that smelled like death's breath. The dog whimpered, a sound so faint it barely registered, its ribs poking through its skin like a skeleton wrapped in rags. I tossed the log aside, watching it sink into the mire with a dull plop, and reached for the mutt. My hands sank into its fur, wet and clammy, and I gagged as the smell hit full force, rotting flesh, river muck, and a metallic tang that coated my tongue like old pennies. I scooped it up, cradling it against my chest, its weight feather-light but somehow oppressive, like it carried more than just bones. "You're okay now," I said, voice steady despite the tremor in my gut. "Let's get you out of this hellhole." But as I stood, the mud shifted, subtle, almost alive, rippling under my boots like something beneath was stirring. I glanced down, flashlight beam cutting through the gloom, and saw it. A faint trail, barely there, leading from the dog's prison into the trees. Not paw prints. Too long, too deep, like claws had raked the earth. My pulse quickened. "What the hell dragged you here?" I muttered, half to the dog, half to the camera. It didn't answer, just stared, its breath shallow and ragged, a faint wheeze that sounded too much like a warning. I turned back to Drifter, the canoe bobbing gently in the shallows, a lifeline in this festering pit. The mud clung to me, reluctant, each step a battle against its grip, and that whine followed, soft but insistent, burrowing into my skull. "Never been on a canoe, huh?" I said, setting it on a blanket in the bow, trying to lighten the mood. "First time for everything." "Don't puke on my gear, all right?" I forced a grin, but it felt hollow. The dog just lay there, eyes fixed on me, or past me, into the dark beyond the reeds. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see what it saw. The dock was rickety, planks creaking under my weight as I tied Drifter off. The house loomed ahead, a squat, weathered thing with peeling paint and a sagging roof. The air here was different, stale, heavy, with a faint whiff of smoke and something sour I couldn't place. I lifted the dog, its body limp in my arms, and trudged up the bank. "Hello?" I called, my voice echoing off the trees. "Anyone home?" A man emerged, late 60s, grizzled like me but softer, with a hunch that said life had worn him down. He squinted, then his eyes widened. "Oh no, is it alive?" he rasped, hobbling toward me. I nodded, shifting the dog's weight. "Yeah, found her stuck in the mud a few hundred yards back. Yours?" He rushed over, relief flooding his face. "My Pyrenees. She's been gone 2 days. Thought I'd lost her for good." We cleaned her up. Warm water from a bowl, mud sloughing off in clumps that smelled like death warmed over. "She's 14, he said, scrubbing her fur. "Can't move her back legs much anymore. Must have wandered off and got trapped." I helped, drying her with a towel, the warmth bringing a flicker of life to her eyes. "Lucky I came along," I said, grinning. "She wasn't barking much, voice was shot." He nodded, tears in his eyes.
A miracle, man. Stay for lunch. Least I can do. I did. We ate stew by the fire, the dog curled up in her bed, the house creaking around us. It was cozy. Too cozy, like a trap I didn't see closing. They insisted I crash there, rest up for the next leg. I agreed, too tired to argue. Big mistake. Sleep came fast, but it didn't last. I woke to a sound, a low, guttural growl from outside. The room was dark, the fire dead, the air thick with that sour stench again.
I sat up, heart pounding, and grabbed my flashlight. The dog was gone from her bed. "What the hell?" I muttered, stumbling to the window. The river glinted under the moon, but something moved, tall, thin, shadow black, loping toward the trees. I crept downstairs, the floorboards groaning like they were in pain. The old man was awake, standing by the door, staring out. "She's out there," he whispered, voice trembling. "She always goes back." I frowned.
What? The dog?
He turned, his eyes hollow. "Not just her. Something took her out there. It's not done with us." I grabbed my camera, instinct kicking in. "Let's go," I said, but he shook his head. "You don't get it. It's not safe." I ignored him, stepping into the night. The air was frigid, the smell overpowering. Rot, blood, and something alive, but wrong. The growl came again, closer, and I saw her, the dog, standing by the river, but she wasn't alone. That shadow loomed behind her, red eyes glinting like embers. I ran, camera rolling, but the ground shifted, mud sucking me down, roots snagging my legs. The dog turned, her eyes glowing too, and barked, a sound that wasn't hers, deep and jagged. The shadow lunged, and I bolted, heart in my throat, the canoe my only escape. I paddled away, the house shrinking behind me, their screams fading into the night. I made it out, but I'm not the same. The footage shows it. The dog, the shadow, those eyes. I uploaded it, called it River Rescue Gone Wrong, and tried to move on. But I hear that growl in my dreams, smell that rot when the wind blows. The old man's words haunt me. It's not done with us. Maybe it's not done with me either. And there it ends. Or does it? From the red-eyed terror stalking Clover Forest to the giggling graves of St. Agnes to a river rescue that pulled Tom into something he can't paddle away from. These nightmares don't just stop when the screen goes dark. What was that creature with the glowing eyes? Who or what clawed at Frank's soul? And that dog, was it really saved? Or was it the bait? 6 stories, 6 shadows, and 1,000 questions still clawing at the edges of your mind. Sleep on that, if you can. If these tales sank their hooks into you, don't leave me in the dark alone. Subscribe to No Sleep Nightmares Reddit and hit that bell so you never miss what's lurking next. Drop a comment below. Which nightmare's keeping you awake tonight? Let's keep the sleepless alive until the shadows call again. Good luck closing your eyes.